Okay, my name is Brijette Pena, and I'm the owner and founder of San Diego Seed Company.
Okay, so tell me where we are in San Diego.
So we're located in Mount Hope, San Diego. It's just south of the 94. We're about 2 miles as the bird flies from downtown San Diego, and we are on a certified organic urban farm.
Okay, now it is not an easy thing to do to have an organic farm and to be certified because of float and wind and proximity and population density. Tell me about that.
So the certification process for the urban farm is the same certification process that you have to undergo for a large-scale commercial farm. There are some benefits because we don't have other farms around us. That's nice. We don't have to worry about a non-organic farm next door that's spraying X, Y, and Z. But at the same time, we do have to worry about what people next door are doing. So luckily, where we are located, this farm was never, this land was never commercial. It never had anything that we had to worry about that would exempt us from the organic certification. And then you go through a 3-year period of making sure that you're following all the rules. And that was about 3 years ago. So we're super excited to be the only certified organic urban seed producing farm in the United States. So it's pretty neat what we're doing, where we're doing it, how we're doing it, and on the scale that we're doing it.
Now you have a different circumstance than most of the people in farming and agriculture that we speak with. You are growing not for the production of food, but for seed production, and that's a different operation, isn't it?
Yes, and that's part of the reason why we can do this in an urban space. The whole property is an acre. We're growing on less than an acre, but because seeds can be produced in such a tight area and we can get so much yield per square foot, it allows us to be able to make this a real sustainable farm that we can make a living off of. If we were doing produce, the spacing, I don't know if we could make that happen, but we definitely have a unique situation because we're urban and producing seed.
Now you are producing seed and you're close together, so that sounds like a great thing, but it also can be a problem, can it not? Tell me why.
Absolutely. So cross-pollination is an issue for us because we're so small. We only can produce one variety of each crop that we're producing for the year. So that means we also have to depend on contract growers or other farmers to grow seed for us. That seems like it could be a problem, but it's actually a really neat blessing because it allows me to get people who aren't into seed production, get them excited and wanting to produce seed for us so that we can offer it in our catalog.
So, as we've discussed, we met you at the Santa Rosa Heirloom Expo, but we also had a secondary meet through Nicole, our neighbor across the street, who has started the Extra Harvest Share project. And one of the things that we do with Extra Harvest Share is that same kind of concept. We can't necessarily grow zucchini in every space in our yard, but if one of the neighbors grows zucchini and this neighbor grows tomatoes and this neighbor grows beans, you can take a little bit from each one and satisfy the needs of the community. And then we share our harvests with everyone. So in a way, it's like your seed production, right? You can still accomplish the goal by working together.
Exactly. It takes a village. I mean, that term is so relevant right now with everything that's going on in the world. You really need community support. We, as a seed company, have gotten tremendous amounts of community support to make what we're doing happen, and we love it. We love that it strengthens the farming community, the gardening community, and people who really love to eat good produce.
You also share within the community because we planted a straw bale garden a couple weeks ago and did a podcast portion on that and a YouTube video on that. And you had donated some seeds for the extra
Absolutely.
harvest share concept. So
Absolutely.
that's not the only circumstance where you do that. Tell us about your community involvement.
Yeah, so we support the Ocean Beach Seed Library. So we donate seeds to them and give seeds to them so that they can pass them on to other people. We also donate to school gardens, community gardens across San Diego County and beyond. Last year we donated over $5,000 worth of seed packs that went to anybody who basically needed them. It's pretty simple. We can produce quite a bit of seed, more than we probably can sell, and I want people to grow at the end of the day. My personal passion is that people have their hands in the dirt, because when they have their hands in the dirt, they're more likely to care about the dirt, and then they care about the environment, their community, so many other things that are important. And so, you know, something as simple as donating a seed pack can have a snowball effect that is really quite amazing.
Okay, the seed library is something that many people have heard of, but not everybody. And it's exactly what it sounds like, correct? Tell us what a seed library is all about.
So a seed library is basically, you can get free seeds, and depending on how the seed library is set up, there are different methods. You check out seeds and then you return them at the end of the year, and it's a way to get people seeds who perhaps couldn't afford them, or maybe only needs a little bit. It's a really neat program. And you know, although we as a seed company need community support, we need people to buy our seeds so we can stay in business, we also want to support those people who just need seed, want to grow in a really small area. And so if they're going to be gardeners of any kind, whether it be beautiful flowers or produce, they're still you know, gardening and enjoying the beautiful outdoors.
So this is like the germplasm facility in Fort Collins or the Svalbard seed plant in Norway. At least there's some variety of almost everything in there, and you don't have to grow it all, but you at least have it available.
Correct, correct.
It's beautiful. Okay, now tell me how seeds represent diversity in society, if you would, because they all come from somewhere in the world, correct?
Yeah, so seeds are actually the most widely traveled commodity, meaning that you can have seeds that are produced in Peru, then sent to Israel to be processed, then sent to Canada to be packaged, and then put in packaged and distributed all over the world. So it's really an incredible commodity, and it travels all over. And we've seen in the last 50 years a huge decrease in the amount of varieties that are available to us. I think one of the things that's really interesting to me when I'm teaching a new gardener, you know, they say, wow, gee, this catalog has 50 varieties of tomatoes, but when I go to the store, there's only 2 or 3. So, you know, seed companies, especially small seed companies, really focus on having as many varieties available as possible and preserving varieties that could perhaps become extinct because nobody's saving them, growing them, and saving them again. We actually have several varieties in our catalog that came from seed savers in San Diego, and their work of saving seeds for 20, 30 years was then gifted to us, and now we can offer that to our customers. Diversity is so important, and I think now more than ever we're really realizing how important it is to have as many choices as we can in the gardening community. Prior to the global health pandemic, you know, I wasn't even thinking on that scale. I would always tell people that it's so important with global warming to be able to have as many options as we can, because there's so many changes that we can't foresee. So part of the work that we do on our farm is we don't just do seed production, we do breeding and we do trialing, and some of the things that we look into is drought tolerance. We've seen in San Diego County, we're getting drier and drier and drier. Despite the last 2 years, which have been somewhat wet, we need resilient varieties that can do well in environmental changes that we don't even know what they are yet. So by having as much germplasm to choose from, breeders can, you know, basically breed for the future of climate change.
So this is going to lead nicely as we're going to walk back into the back here, I hope. I was talking with Nicole about not just the difference in different kinds of tomatoes, but she says she's got a wild tomato out front that is absolutely bomb-proof. It is drought tolerant, it is disease resistant. They're little cherry tomatoes, and they come back every single year when everything else failed.
Yep.
We don't necessarily know exactly what variety that is, but for somebody in San Diego, I mean, at least for me, tomatoes are notoriously difficult because of blight, because of drought. I'm sure you've got it down pat, but I sure do not. You find a variety that really works for you and you can keep it, but you have to have that variety.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct, and you also have to have somebody doing the testing and the documenting of it. You know, I think one of the things that's overwhelming for gardeners, and even I, you know, will flip through a seed catalog and get all excited and then overwhelmed at all of the options, you know? You need somebody in your community who is doing the research and trialing things and documenting and saying, well, look, this tomato did really well on the coast, but it didn't do so well in East County in our different microclimates. So that's the role that I've chosen to take with our seed company. And traditionally in farming and agriculture communities, everybody would be doing this on some level. People would be growing in their community, they would be getting together on Sundays and talking about, oh, you know, this variety of tomato did real well for me. Well, this was a bad tomato year, but this variety still did well. We're seeing people come back together and share that knowledge, especially with the boom of social media and Facebook groups where people can post information about what they're doing. I think one of the coolest things that I see is when people become little citizen scientists, you know, and they just start documenting everything that they're doing and sharing it. And it allows us to make leaps and bounds in our decisions with what we're going to grow because other people have grown it and have taken notes and paid attention.
It's science. Knowledge is power,
yes,
right?
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. Okay, so you talk on your website about microclimates. Now this, what works and what doesn't in one area and the other applies particularly to San Diego. Tell me why.
So when we started the seed company all those years ago, the aha moment was we were actually sitting at Seeds at City College, just right downtown, in a, I think it was a cool season production class. And we realized, wow, nobody's really producing seed or really helping gardeners of San Diego understand all the different microclimates. And you cannot have the same conversation about what to grow in May with a grower in La Jolla as you can with a grower in Jamul. Very different conversation. So it started off there, and that was really the beginning of trying to understand what varieties do well in different places. And at the time, we didn't have a central farm. We had what we called micro farms, and they were basically front yards and backyards of people who were gracious enough to let us grow there. But the beauty was we had different areas of San Diego, so we could gather that information and go, wow, this cherry tomato will produce year-round on the coast, but it's going to putter out in, you know, September in East County. And so a necessity, actually, out of a necessity grew some really great information that we got to share with growers. And now we are expanding to not only serve San Diego County, but also Southern California, and really focus on varieties that do well in containers because people don't have a lot of space to grow.
And it can be the difference in 10 miles. I noticed on your website you talked about the difference between North Park and what, Pacific Beach or something of that nature? Or
absolutely.
PB La Jolla area and Point Loma. Now, I grew up in Point Loma, and it was very misty and kind of cooler, but the clay is clay soil. It was like one big pond bottom up there.
Yep.
And so you had to garden much differently than in my yard, where part of it is a brick. It's just a brick. That's not even clay. It's just this limestone shelf. And the other one was amended beautifully by some gardener in the past. You could go down about 8 feet, and it's this gorgeous, gorgeous loamy soil. So talk about how soil takes a part in that and how you can change your soil with amendment.
Absolutely. So when we moved in here 3 years ago, this was just a block of hot, dry, weedy mess. There was nothing here that was promising, and we actually didn't even have water in the back. We had to trench it in from the front. That's a whole different story. But you know, we took on this Goliath task of trying to get this, you know, half-acre portion of this property up and running, and the first thing we had to do was amend the soil. We had to bring in truckloads and truckloads, which we did with my tiny little Tacoma and a wheelbarrow and a shovel. No big equipment, and we just layered on as much mulch and compost and manure that we could possibly get our hands on. That, in combination with just really good gardening practices, now I can get a broad fork into the ground 6-12 inches and crack open the earth and see worms, and it's dark and it's beautiful. Now this has been a process, and I know for new gardeners it can be overwhelming, but I always tell people it's like baking a really good cookie. You know, like the kitchen sink cookies where you put everything you have. You put nuts, you put chocolate, you put all the goodies in it. really good soil is very diverse, and so we try to bring in different sources of compost and mulch and manure and really work it in as much as we can. And luckily the last 2 years of rain help as well. That has increased the microbiology that we have in our soil, which is, you know, really helpful. And then the other thing that I want to mention too is it's a process, and it's kind of like a snowball. You start it and it's small, and then you keep pushing it. It will, after time, get its own momentum. And what we've noticed the last 2 years of really good rain, after putting 12 inches of mulch down, that mulch held in the moisture, which then fed the microbiology, and then it starts really taking on a life of its own. At this point, besides battling all the weeds and occasionally having to add a little bit of organic fertilizer, it's really set it and forget it. That's 3 years of really hard work, but now we are in what we call the salad days. It's relatively easy now.
But this is not a one-shot deal. And I mean, I found that as I mulch regularly and compost regularly. My husband is gracious and lets me bring a nice big load of horse manure in. Yeah, I know.
This huge pile, you can see the stain. It never ends. And when we moved in, I told my husband, like, okay, we're just gonna drop it there this time. It never ends. As soon as it's gone, I have an arborist come and drop another one.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's manure. And it's just the life on the farm. That is a precious resource.
You're good marriage. That's
Yeah.
Okay. How about, if it's okay with you,
Yeah.
would you take us on a walk and talk through your garden, please?
Let's come on through. It's, you know, really always kind of a mess, so I can't say sorry it's a mess, because it always is. But
it looks amazingly tidy to me.
so like I said, when we moved in here, there was nothing back here, and there are some tripping hazards, so do be careful. We have about 50 rows. And we decided to do row crop style, partly because the organization for seed production is really nice. It's a lot easier for me to be able to keep track of my rows, what's planted where, when I can do it in the row crop style. And basically when we moved in, we started with the first row, which is actually row number 2 now. And we just kept moving this way, all the way down to the last part, the last row that we have done. And the soil in the first row is 10 times better than the last row, because it's just had more time to mature. And it's just, you know, it's that snowball effect that I had talked about.
Is it deeper down here than it is up there? It looks like that because there's a retaining
There's a little
wall.
bit of a slope, but it's mostly just because all the compost and mulch that we've put down. It's definitely not as even as it could be. Go ahead.
I was going to say peppers and kale, I see, and sweet peas, and
so we do 3 things here. We do production, seed production, which this is seed production right here. The peppers will also be seed production. We do breeding, so we have varieties that we've crossed on the farm that we offer to our growers, and then we do trialing. And trialing is growing varieties to decide if they're worth carrying in our catalog. That savory cabbage is one of my favorites, and so we're hopefully going to carry that next year. We've trialed it for several years and it always does really great. Another trialing item that we have here is, so this is a Table King. It's a scallop squash.
oh, scallop. Is that the little
It's round, like it looks like a Bennings,
like a
but
flying
the
saucer?
reason why I love this variety is because it's a bush variety, and you could see how bushy it is. It doesn't have runners, so if you're growing, you know, in a box or in a small area, you can see it's still a large plant because zucchinis and squashes just tend to be, but it's really, you've got this area and you don't have runners going everywhere. One of the things that I like to do is actually interplant underneath. I will plant other stuff. So I've got carrots that are popping up here, and I'm just letting these leaves kind of shade them. These yard-long beans will be for seed production, and so they're gonna grow up here. That's the plan. They will grow up here, and then we'll be able to pick them for seed and offer to our customers. So the stuff that we do seed production of are things that are kind of odd or hard to find otherwise. or varieties that we're doing breeding of that we will save the seeds as we go through the breeding process.
Now, with a zucchini or a bean, say you get one bean plant and it puts out beans like mad, you have to not only plant the thing in the beginning, see how it grows and what condition it grows under, but you have to taste it to see if it tastes like anything, and then you have to figure out how many seeds you need to save for the next time, correct?
Correct. There is a population concern, so there's some things that we can't do seed production of because you need at least 500 plants, and that would be this whole area. So we can't do seed production of like brassicas, broccolis in particular. They're just so big, so we have other people produce that for us. But things like beans are very easy, peppers are very easy, tomatoes are very easy. Squash. These will not be, I only have 3 plants, so these will not be for seed production. These are just for trialing. But all these sweet peas here, that variety actually originally came to us from a seed saver in Point Loma. And so that is why we call it Point Loma Pops. She gave me a handful of seeds. We grew them. It was the first sweet pea variety that we really had good luck with. We'd had a really hard time getting sweet peas that grew fast enough to be able to plant them in the fall, have them grow and be big and beautiful before it got too hot. And interestingly enough, she gave me that variety, and then a couple months later, she calls me freaking out because she had left the rest of her seeds out. They had gotten wet. She was afraid that she had lost 20 years worth of work. But luckily, since we had them, you know, she had not all of her eggs were in one basket, so to speak, and we have the variety, and so now we offer it.
So this is one of the most wonderful things to me about the ability to save genetic material and varieties and the history that can come along with it. Because I was raised in Point Loma, and I remember going past sweet peas in one of my neighbor's yards that had them. And I'm not saying this is the variety, but it's really neat to think that 50 years ago, I could have walked past that same variety and said, oh, hey, look at the pretty flower. And it's the same flower potentially.
Not just that, it's the confidence building that you're giving each other in the growing community. I thought I couldn't grow sweet peas because we just were having such bad luck. We'd plant them in the fall, they'd get about halfway, and then it would get really hot and they would just burn up. Or they'd get totally covered in powdery mildew during the wet, or the cool. We're close enough to the coast that we get that coastal eddy and that moisture in the morning. And so I just thought, okay, well, sweet peas aren't something I can do. And then she said, no, here, try this. I've been saving these. They do really well here. And now we get to offer that, on a 100 times scale to all the growers or all the customers that buy our seeds. So I don't know, it's a really neat thing. And every time I grow them, I think of her.
Yeah, this is just a beautiful thing. So now sweet peas are not the only flowers we see. I see marigolds and nasturtiums and milkweed, and correct?
Yeah, we have a very diverse farm. I believe in diversity. Row cropping kind of has like a bad connotation because it makes you think that it's just rows and rows of the same thing. Not at all. We always plant for pollinators. You will see tons and tons of butterflies on our farm. And then we also use a lot of the edible flowers in cooking. The calendula we use, every year we make a calendula salve that we use, and it works 10 times better than anything you buy in the store.
That's a wonderful smell
for
too.
Our cracked hands and just working on the farm. It is a farm, it is a seed production farm, but it is also our homestead. So we put extra care into making it beautiful because we live here. And when people come over here, they are excited to see that you can do this in the city. And when we bought the property, one of my goals was that I want to be an example of a successful urban farm. I believe that urban farming can really be a benefit to communities. We don't have to have 5 acres in Ramona to be a farmer. You can farm on 1 acre and you can really be an important part of your community and make your community healthy on a very small area. And so that's what I want to show here, and hopefully we've been doing it.
We talked to some farmers up again in the Montana area, and they were saying that diversity is not this touchy-feely save the planet thing alone. It's also something that really can increase your productivity, because they did row cropping, but they would have I think it was something like between 20 or 30% of their entire, 26? 26%, Rick says, of their entire field they took out, and in the strips they not only let, but they planted other kinds of plants, and they didn't farm on that. And yet the yield was still the same on their other rows because of the benefits of diversity and pollinators and things of that nature. Do you find that to be the case?
Pollinators are incredibly important to us. If our plants aren't pollinated, we don't get fruit or flower, and then we don't get seed. So pollinators are really important, and we can't keep them happy on just our, peppers and tomato plants alone. We have to have other beautiful, biodiversity that they can enjoy. So I always get this question in my urban farming class. People will talk about, crop rotation and the importance of that. And crop rotation on a small, residential lot is very difficult. You may only have a couple of pots that you can rotate between. But what I always say is, more important than that is a diverse garden. You really want to have as many flowers, pollinator plants as you can, so that you can have an equilibrium between, the good and the bad bugs.
Yes, and that diversity also applies to your pollinators, correct? Because we all know the importance of honeybees in pollinating, but we don't necessarily associate the wild bees, the native bees, and the butterflies and hummingbirds and all the rest of the pollinators, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We just had somebody in class, yesterday was one of our urban farming courses, and I was cracking up because she was saying that she had this caterpillar that was really weird looking, and so she swore that it was going to be this beautiful butterfly because it was a weird looking caterpillar. And then she said, but it was just a lame moth. And I thought to myself, that's what we're saying now, but we used to say that about bees. We used to go, bees, they sting you. And now people wear bee t-shirts and everything's about bees. And the same thing with butterflies. I think as people continue to spend time outside, you end up, you create more reverence for all life, whether it be a lame moth or, a beautiful butterfly. They're all a part of the ecosystem, and we have to live in harmony with them in the best way that we can.
But not just that, we don't know what that thing does.
Exactly.
Yes.
Moths are really, really important to us on our farm for pollination. We have some of our edible squashes that really their primary pollinator is a nighttime moth. And so if I were to wipe those all out because they weren't as pretty as the monarchs, I wouldn't get my squash.
So show us some more of your garden.
Yeah, come on. It's probably 18 million degrees in there, but if you want to just peek into the greenhouse there, we built that last spring, and it was a game changer for us, just to be able to have, a spot that we could start our seeds that was regulated. Every year we're doing a little bit to try to increase the efficiency of it. Put in a new window. We're going to get solar, and then hopefully we can get a fan, which will make a big difference.
Now this is not something that everybody. I mean, I could potentially put something like this together. It wouldn't look quite so tidy, but for everybody that's listening and not looking, this is a frame out of 2x4s, and it's just plastic sheeting.
So this was built with the same concept of building basically a small shed. It's I think it's 16 by 20. So this is as sturdy as a house. The only reason why I'm lucky enough to have it is because my cousin was here for a little while, and he's a contractor, and so, he built it beautifully. This is greenhouse plastic, which I was able to source from a local greenhouse in Encinitas. They have thousands of square feet of plastic, so when I asked them if I could buy, basically scraps from them, they gave it to me. So the one benefit of being small is this was nothing for them. They were going to throw this in the trash. So it's a wonderful asset. A lot of people can't have something like this, but you can create a small greenhouse by either using the trays that you buy with the plastic on top. There's all kinds of small setups that you can do. One of the, I guess, benefits and disadvantages of having a greenhouse this big is I constantly overseed, because I'm in there tinkering and planting, but then I end up giving those plants away. So, they end up making their way into the community one way or another.
So if you have a 10 by 15, this is ish?
This is about 16 by 20.
16 by 20, okay, 16 by 20. Why is this a game changer for you?
Because of the quickness and the way in which I can get something from seed form to plant form and into the ground, how quick I can do that. So We start 99% of the plants that go into the ground, we start from seed. We direct sow very little on our farm, and we do that because water is expensive. We pay residential water rates. We do not, have farm rates. So we have to be really meticulous about our water use. And by being able to start things in here, keeping a tray moist is a lot easier and a lot cheaper than keeping a 30-foot row moist for even germination. The other portion of it is just the regulation of temperature and the humidity. So I can get things to pop up way quicker with better germination rates and even germination rates across the trays, which allow me to then get everything out into the rows in a timely manner.
Now I'm so glad you brought this up, because we did we started our garden planting a month and a half or so ago. 2 months. Time has gone strangely.
Yes.
But I had a big seed order prior to that, and I planted the same seeds that I shared with my neighbors. Sometimes the neighbors shared them for a couple weeks, saved them for a couple weeks, and then went on with the seeds. There were a lot of mine that just plain did not pop up, and I don't know what it was, but I am pretty sure that a very strong impact was all the rain we got. We got a week of solid rain, and the ground was just absolutely
And they
soaked.
can wash away. Those things can happen. You can wash things, right off to the side.
Yes, because their seeds germinated. Same seed, same plant, same everything, same manufacturer, same everything.
Yeah, I can plant in really good propagation mix that allows for quick, easy germination. So, seed starting is really the economical way to have a garden. I know it's daunting and it's another thing to learn, but if you can just learn a few tricks of seed starting and become really good at it, the cost of your garden goes down tremendously, because you're not having to buy starts from a greenhouse or a nursery. And you also can get a lot of varieties that are not available from the nurseries.
Yes.
And you can make sure they're not pot bound, and you can continue to seed start. Like we start seeds year round. Even in December, I'm in here tinkering around and getting stuff started. I've had thousands of starts come out of this greenhouse, go into the ground, or get sold or get given to people in the community, and it never stops. And by having this, I'm constricted about as far as how much space I have, but as soon as something gets big enough, that spot gets filled with something else.
Okay, well, you bring up space. So you have this lovely greenhouse, but what if you have somebody, my neighbor next door says, I want to start some seeds. They buy some seeds from you. Do they need a greenhouse to do it, to start
Absolutely not. That's the beauty of living in San Diego County, okay? We pay the sun dollar tax. Utilize it, people. It's expensive to live here. You can grow tomatoes almost year round. Take advantage. As long as you don't live in an area like Hamul or low desert that gets frost or really cold, you can start your seedlings either indoors if it's still pretty low temperatures, or simply outdoors. Most people who start their gardens, especially if you're starting them in the spring and you're, if you're inland, coastal, the mesas, the areas that don't get really that warm or that cold, you can start them outdoors on a table. Very simple. You don't even, it's just incredible how little infrastructure you need. Where I'm from, you have to heat the greenhouses with a stove because it's so cold in the spring.
I know how that goes. Don't wilt.
I started this morning and then I got distracted. Those are things that happen. So this is a cool thing that we could talk about for seed production. This is all going to seed. It is going to seed, so.
Hold on, I'm trying to figure out what that is. Radish? What is that?
Close, same family. Brassica rapa. So it's actually a mustard, but it's called Ethiopian Kale. It is my all-time favorite. It is so delicious. It's a very savory, kind of like almost umami flavored kale.
Interesting.
And I'm not a big kale fan, but this I can put in anything. Soups, salads, wraps. It's delicate enough that you can actually make little dolmas out of it. It's really a neat crop.
It's beautiful too. It looks like a hedge.
Yeah, seed production can be pretty gorgeous, I think.
So this is, I want to say, am I looking at cabbage or broccoli here or something?
These guys that's a Romanesco cauliflower. They take a really long time to get heads. It's kind of unfortunate. We harvested a few last week. But this is a really neat example of companion planting. You know, these are giving these guys enough shade that they can continue on through the warm season. They'll be ready probably, I give them probably 15, 20 more days. But that was the intent. We planted those here because we knew these were gonna get really big and we were gonna do seed production for them. So they give them a little bit of shade, helps them out because it's pretty warm right now.
Now I see tomatoes. What kind of tomato is your favorite for San Diego?
That's so hard to answer. Oh man. I really like the San Marzano because I like making salsa, and I'm not a big fan of watery salsa. And the San Marzano, we grow the San Marzano on our farm year round here. We just pulled out a whole row that was there for 2 seasons. And the amount of tomatoes you get and the amount of sauce and salsa that you can make and freeze, so I really love that. Green Zebra is another one of my favorite just because I like the flavor and the difference in the color. It's hard to say. Every tomato that we carry, we've trialed here, we produce the seed, and we really like how they do. This is a new variety that I've grown for a couple years now and I really like, and this will be for seed production. It's called Tasmanian Chocolate. And the reason why I like it is look how stout and sturdy those plants are. So they're made for pot culture. They're a good plant for container gardening. You'll get nice fat tomatoes on a very small plant that's got a really sturdy stem. So for example, those are really good for pot. We've got another variety over here called Lucid Dream. This is a variety that Brad Gates produced, and it's very beautiful, but look at the shape of the plant. You have to stake these up.
Sprawl.
So, you know, those are the things that we're always trying to include in our catalog is information. If you know nothing about tomatoes and you put something like this in a pot without any structure to hold it, you'll be really sorry. Whereas the Tasmanian Chocolate, you know, you can pretty much get away with almost not staking those at all. Sometimes on our farm, because we just have so many things going on, we don't stake our tomatoes for seed production. We just let them fall on the ground because we're not selling the produce. It doesn't have to be perfect. This row will probably be that way because we're just so busy right now.
Okay, so we're on tomatoes. I gotta ask, one of the neighbors that's in our garden share program is in the family that owns Valari down on Midway. That is, all San Diegans will know this. It's been around forever and a day. So if you had to grow a tomato for spaghetti sauce, what would be your tomato?
Oh, I don't know. I think it'd go back to the San Marzano.
Okay, she's gonna ask, so we're gonna put one in.
It's so easy. So when we do seed production, we actually take the time to cut each tomato open, scoop out the seeds, and then we save all the goodie because we want to make sauce with that. Other varieties, we don't always have time or the luxury to do that. But it cooks down so good. You don't have to peel it. If you want to peel it, you can, but there's really no need. You can make tomato paste, tomato sauce, salsa, you know, all kinds of goodies.
And they'll all taste a little different, correct? Every variety has just a little different
Absolutely.
taste.
There's a difference in the bricks, which is the measurement of sugar, the acidity, the balance between the skin, everything. I mean, if we come over here, I know you have your mask on, so you can't pop one in as easy, but you're welcome to try one. So these are black cherries, and these taste totally different.
I'm gonna come on the other side. Just pick one that looks...
Yep.
Okay.
Just pick one that got a little brown tint on the top, you know? Give it a squeeze.
Grab that one right there.
It's pretty sweet, but it's also a little, one of my critiques of those is it's a little mealy.
But
I'm not a big fan of the inside of the flavor of those, but when you cook those down, that kind of mealiness really makes for a velvety sauce.
Okay, but I have to say that mealy or not, people do not understand the joys of a tomato fresh out of the garden because it is night and day from a store tomato. Unless you buy one of those that's $8 a pound. Tomatoes out of the garden are a whole different animal than what you get in the store.
You really can't even compare them.
You can't.
It's kind of like having canned pineapple and fresh pineapple.
Yes, that's exactly it.
The first time I had fresh pineapple, I swore it was someone told me it was pineapple. I'm like, no, this is not pineapple. This is absolutely a different fruit altogether.
Beautiful. Well, I love what you did with the supports here on the stakes with the poles. That just seems like an incredibly efficient thing to do.
We have done so many different systems for tomato trellising, and they all are pretty terrible. We've done the Missouri weave, that's messy. We've done different systems with strings across, and honestly, because most of the varieties of tomatoes that we carry are going to be indeterminate, pole, very lanky, because we focus on flavor, and that just tends to be the case. We need good systems to hold them up. This came to us, like earlier we were talking about the beauty of social media and sharing ideas. My husband found this video on YouTube of this tomato trellising system, and we put it up, we fell in love with it, and then lo and behold, the guy's name is Josh Satin. He came and interviewed me on my farm and didn't know we had his system, and he saw the system and was blown away. And now I have been promoting the system. So it's just such a neat way to share ideas. It's really inexpensive. I mean, you have the T-post, so that's a little bit of an investment, but you buy them once. This is just a 3/4 inch conduit. I got these for like a penny a piece at the Habitat for Humanity. So they're not, really expensive. And then we can do our clips here. If you want to do wood and you're a little more, you have a little bit more time on your hand, you could make really cool wood posts. We just do this because it allows us to pull them up if we ever want to change and do, eventually we'll probably end up doing a different crop here, and we'll need to pull these up and get them out of the way.
So you should have a little plastic clip that attaches the string to the top.
We do.
Of the
I'll show you over here. These are really, really good looking. This is probably the sexiest plant I've seen on the farm as far as how neat it is. So we have the main stem here, and this is just a plant clip. And then you can decide if you want to train it to 1 liter or 2. We do 2, and one of the reasons why I like that is, and I like having these posts, is you can bring them together or kind of stretch them out.
As they grow.
So you get a little bit more airflow, and then it allows it to be a lot easier to go in and pull out the suckers.
That's brilliant. You get twice if you get a good strong plant, you get twice the mileage out of it.
Absolutely. And for us, powdery mildew is a big deal, and it's really a constant battle on the farm. So we do a lot of cultural practices to try to keep it, at bay. And one of them is just good airflow. And by having this open, we can get good airflow in here to try to decrease the amount of powdery mildew we get. We always get it, but
you think about doing that with a tree, take out crossing branches that go toward the middle, but you don't really think about it for tomatoes, but it's just as important, if not more so.
Absolutely. Coming in here and getting all these out is really important. And I think one of the things that's nice about doing this method, if you can, it kind of makes it less daunting. I feel like some of the other ones, things get so messy that you just kind of get to the point where you're like, whatever, I'm just gonna let it grow. If you stay on top of it, we put the plant clips in when they're very young, and then, we just come out here in the evening and, take off the suckers, and you can keep winding the plant around it if you want.
So those little plant clips, you can reuse them every year, I take it?
Absolutely, yep. They clip on and off, which is really, really nice. So we're gonna have a really good tomato year this year. They're
It's beautiful.
very exciting.
And cucumbers I'm seeing here as well.
Absolutely. So these are a variety that we bred called Market 8 Dude. It's a cross between Market More and Straight 8, and it's a quote from one of our favorite movies, The Big Lebowski. So some people get it, some people don't. Some people are like, that's a weird name. I'm like, well, you haven't seen the movie, I guess. This is seed production this is lettuce here. So it's all been flowering. So when these are ready, we'll be pulling the seed off of here. Earlier we talked a little bit about just being small and being local and kind of shortening your supply chain. What's really neat is our seeds will go from here, once they're dry, to City Farmers, which is one of our retailers down the street.
That's one of our favorite bunches too.
In a period of a week. You cannot get fresher seeds than that.
And that helps germination to be really,
Absolutely.
really, really successful.
Absolutely. We see incredible germination rates because they're brand new seeds, basically.
Now, I have seeds in my yard that look like this, but I often leave them until they get a little more dried out because I'm saving the seed. Do you have to let them get dried out if you save your own seed?
These are botanically immature for seed. They have not fully produced their seed yet. So if you were to try to pull these, you would not get full seed. You know, I tell people, like, even if you just let 1 or 2 things in your yard go to seed, you will inevitably make a mess and drop some seed on the ground, and then it'll sprout up, and then the next season you'll be like, great, I didn't even have to plant that. There is lettuce that is growing in our driveway, and that's from doing production, and you know, things fall and it happens. So, you know, that's one of the things I love about seed, letting something go to seed.
Okay, so for all my neighbors that say to me, actually not many of my neighbors say this at all, but the people walking around the neighborhood that might say, why do you keep those dead plants? To me, it's a reflection of cycles in life in a way you might not get in San Diego.
Absolutely. I think when you become a gardener, you tend to be a little more in tune with the cycles of life. You know, you have birth of the seed that you started, then you have growth, and then you have senescence, where things are, you know, going from their prime stage to, you know, basically back to the earth. I think that's, you know, one of the reasons why I'm particularly drawn to seed production, why it's beautiful. You know, for the practical gardener, okay, if you don't like it and it's ugly, pull it out. But if you have the space and you just let it reseed, you're probably gonna have a pretty good crop of lettuce seed as soon as we get a rain, and you really didn't have to do much work. So it's kind of, it's a good idea for the lazy gardener.
Okay, now this brings me to one of those things that many people say, well, I can just put any seed in the ground, and in many cases you can, but tell me why you can't put some seeds off of plants that you might grow in the store, or fruits that you might, or vegetables you might grow in the store. Why sometimes it doesn't matter what the quality of the thing is, it's not gonna grow.
Exactly, so commercial varieties, you know, we could do a whole podcast just on the seed industry and that information. But, you know, let's say you get a pepper from the store. You may or may not, depending on the variety, be able to start those seeds because they could be sterile, for one. Or if they're hybrids, you will get a very different plant than what you're looking at. And so, you know, I tell people if you're curious, do it. That's the really cool thing about being a citizen scientist. You take a pepper from the store and you plant it out and it was a red pepper, but then you got some weird combination. That's because you're seeing the second generation of that hybrid. And I think the inquisitiveness is so valuable because then you start wondering, well, why is that? Okay, well, why do we do that in the food industry? And you just start being more curious and asking more questions, and that only can lead to better systems.
So if you also, do you think that, let me start that again. Will you also have different growing requirements potentially for that? Is it going to breed true to the parents, but if you don't know what those parents are, you might have a completely different water requirement or climate?
Exactly, and the flavor too. That's a really big thing. You know, I get a lot of people who will say, well, why can't I just start you know, seeds from a tomato I got at the store? Absolutely, you can, but did it taste good in the first place? No. And do you think those seeds are going to produce a plant that tastes good? Probably not. So again, I never discourage anybody from growing in any way, shape, or form. I think it's good for for humanity's collective development. But if you want a really good tasting tomato, get a really good tasting tomato variety of a seed of that variety, and do it right. Part of the tomato family, though,
Is that tomatillo? No?
These are called Peruvian ground cherries, and they are, wait, let me see what color they are. Make sure they're totally right. There you go.
Oh my gosh, it tastes like a fruit.
Isn't it incredible? It's so bizarre.
Huh.
Isn't it incredible? So these are called Peruvian ground cherries. It's a really neat plant for San Diego because look at this. This has been in the ground for almost 2 years now.
I don't even know what that tastes like.
Isn't it incredible? So it's basically part of the tomato family, and it is a wild relative of the tomato. It is completely drought tolerant, very little bugs, enjoy to chomp on it. You can smell the plant has this really tropical flavor or smell, and the fruits are so bizarre and fun to eat. We make jams out of them. It's sweet, it's tart, it's bitter, it's really just incredible.
It's an amazing thing. It's kind of like the crazy love child of a tomato and a mango with a little bit of papaya or something thrown in.
Yeah, and then like lime, and like as you're eating it, you're just like...
It's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, isn't it?
It's bizarre, it is bizarre. So I recommend this plant for San Diegans, especially for permaculture applications, for food forests, because you set it and forget it. This plant, we just now started to put irrigation on it. We haven't even finished doing it. And it just grows. The chickens love them too. Very, very fun.
Okay. And now, oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Okay, I'd also like to ask you about this plant that I'm standing in front of. I'm assuming this is a berry, either raspberry or blackberry or something of that nature?
It is a thornless blackberry.
Okay.
And to be honest, we've been neglecting it. We kind of just stuck it in the ground when we moved in, and then we had other bigger priorities.
But thornless or not, there's a reason it's on the wall side, right?
I'm hoping that it'll kind of grow in and cover up. There's 3 vacant acres down there, but that has been bought by a developer. And so those acres will not be vacant very much longer. And so we're trying to kind of have a little bit of a natural barrier.
But this, I mean, that's a beautiful, beautiful plant, even if it doesn't produce anything. To me, that's one of the, it's almost like an apple blossom,
yes,
isn't it?
It's gorgeous looking.
Beautiful. Yep. And if it's thornless, that's a great example of a plant that does a couple of different things. In a permaculture landscape, often what they do is you might have something that does 2 or 3 different things and accomplishes
stacking your functions.
Stacking your functions. So this is a nice privacy barrier once it gets, you know, this are the grapes. Once this gets all the way grown, a privacy barrier, sound barrier, shade. It will throw great shade and food production, right?
Yeah. We try to be conscientious on the farm, you know, in everything that we do, where we plant things, how we plant things, our water usage. We do rainwater harvesting, which really helps with the water bill. Massive amounts of mulch to keep moisture in the ground as much as we can. And then passive heating and cooling, planting things so that, like these grapes here, you know, that whole area will fill in when we really need it during the hot part and the sun's sitting in the west and it's really hot. It will lose all of its foliage in the wintertime when it's a little bit chillier and we want a little bit more sun. Yes. So the use of evergreens and deciduous plants, you can use them to your advantage for heating and cooling.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so the last couple rows, I'm assuming these are maybe fava beans? Okay, now that's something that is not as commonly used in the United States, correct?
Correct. So these fava beans, we grew them in the last row because I had mentioned earlier, the first row has the best soil, and as you come this way, it's just younger soil as far as how long we've been able to develop it. So this last plot here is not great soil. So we've grown favas here a couple times to help fix nitrogen into the soil. Their roots are really do a good job of breaking up kind of the clay soil. Actually, you know, right here where you're standing, that area we did potatoes, and now it's so light and fluffy because those potatoes have basically helped break up that soil. So this is a really good example of stacking functions. We eat the favas. We make an amazing fava hummus out of it. We use all this biomass. One of the things I love about favas is you get so much biomass that you can put in your compost. We compost a lot on the farm. And then we also do seed production out of these. So we will get favas that we will save the seeds from. Some of these seeds are actually going to go to the OB seed library. So we've got fava beans here, and the beauty of these is they're so young that they're gonna, you know, we will do our quality control. We will process them to make sure that they're all viable seeds, and they will have incredible germ rates because they went from here to the grower in a very short period of time.
Now you talked about a couple things. One is the nitrogen fixer part, which is really important. That's all the legumes and some clovers and things of that nature. They actually pull nitrogen out of the sky and stick it in the ground through the roots, correct?
Correct.
And then explain the biomass concept in conjunction with that, please.
So biomass is just a fancy way of saying plant matter. This plant will give us so much plant matter, like actual stuff that we can compost, in a very small area, and so we get to use that in the compost. Sometimes we even lay the stalks in the chicken coop, you know, just to have something for them to poop on, and then we compost it. Nothing goes to waste on our farm, and I just really love this crop because you get so much out of it. You get food for yourself, you get food essentially for the soil, and then you get food for the compost, which feeds the microbiology of the soil, which in return feeds us again. So it's just that really neat circle of life, and just being aware and knowing that you can do it is really empowering.
So if you got a heavy feeder, a heavy plant that likes like a brassica maybe, would you put favas or some other bean?
Before?
And
Absolutely.
That way, okay.
So one of the things about favas that I think gets a little confusing is they're a bean, but you do grow them in the cool season in San Diego, and that trips people up because other beans you grow in the warm season, which totally, makes sense. So that's, first mistake I think people make. And then the other thing that is really important is when you harvest the favas. I've had lots of people say, I don't like favas. Well, you do, there is a harvest period. When they're about this big, they're delicious. Meaty, lots of flavor.
Looks like an edamame
Yeah,
bean.
They're gorgeous, look at that. But when you let them get too big, like at that point you can just eat them completely, just raw out of them. Let me find one that's a little bit bigger. Once they get this big, there's really another step, and some people disagree, but I think to be really palatable, you harvest the beans out of them, which is a total pain in the bum, because then you drop this in boiling water, just parboil them really quickly, and then you actually squeeze out the inside. So you get off this tough outer casing, but the inside is what makes really good fava hummus. So
interesting.
Again, it's just knowing how to cook the plant.